People think of Islam, they might think of ISIS and how badly women are treated under it. But isn't that really how women are treated under Islam? Iraq's new constitution states that Islam is the state religion, that Islam forms the foundation for all law, and that no law passed can contradict Islam. Which version and interpretation of Islam is going to directly impact the quality of life of women not just in Iraq, but throughout the Middle East? And which version will be implemented is still very much up in the air. Because there's so much misinformation surrounding this topic, let's take a moment to look at the history of Islam in Iraq, some of the problems that Islam can bring, and how some of those problems can be solved. So to better understand where Islam may be heading in Iraq, let's look at how it's impacted Iraq in the past. People have long tried to remove Islam from the law in Iraq in order to promote gender equality. However, this approach is not likely to work, and it has not ever in the past. This is because, again, Islam is the state religion, is in the Iraqi constitution, and religion is deeply embedded in Iraqi culture. Trying to remove Islam from the constitution of Iraq would be a very lengthy, very expensive process, and it is not likely to work. So, to try and improve the social standing of women, people have tried to promote gender equality as an inherent part of Islam, rather than removing it. This strategy is far more likely to work, and is compatible with not only with their culture, but also with their constitution. So with some basic history outlined, what are some of the problems that Islamic women in Iraq are facing that they hope to solve? One such problem is with inheritance. According to TheGuardian.com, the Quran states that a woman may receive at most half of what her brother receives when their parents pass away. Another such issue is with marriage, and more specifically, with polygamy. According to ForeignAffairs.com, the Quran states that a man may have up to 4 wives. This is very obviously a double standard, because there is no such mention of how many husbands a wife may have, for example. And another issue is just what women are allowed to wear. When most people think of what a Muslim woman looks like, I believe that they're thinking of the burqa. And the hijab is what is very common in Iraq. Now the hijab is different from the burqa in that a burqa is going to cover the entire body as well as the entire face of a woman. So you really couldn't tell one woman apart from the next. A hijab does cover the entire body as well, but it also shows the entire face. And burqas are what you commonly find in a country like Saudi Arabia or Iran, and hijabs again are very common in Iraq. So with some basic problems outlined, how can some of those be solved? Well, with inheritance, at the time the Quran was written, a daughter receiving half of what her brother did was very progressive, and it was very forward thinking. It was ahead of a lot of other countries at the time. However, that's simply not true anymore. It is the 21st century, and a more modern interpretation of Islam is going to have this changed quite easily. With marriage and polygamy, this is another example that could be quite easily solved. While it is true that the Quran states that a man may have up to 4 wives, it then states that this is only possible if and only if each wife is treated equally. And the Quran itself states that this is, for all intents and purposes, impossible. So again, a more modern, realistic interpretation is going to have this changed. And with hijabs and what women are allowed to wear, while it is true, again, that the Quran states a woman should wear a hijab, hijabs are mentioned just one time in the Quran, and in this passage it is stated that the hijab is a way to show that you are modest. So the hijab is not really a piece of clothing that's religious. Hijab is a piece of clothing that is mostly has cultural value. And modesty is something that's highly valued in Arab culture. And as the hijab is again a cultural piece of clothing rather than a religious one, the Quran and Islam really has no authority in dictating what a woman can and can't wear and what she should or shouldn't cover. Islam's role in Iraq is still very dynamic and ambiguous. Islam is in the Iraqi constitution, it is their state religion, and it is there to stay. Therefore, the key to advancing women's rights in Iraq is through Islam, is with Islam, rather than removing it. And which interpretation of Islam will prevail is going to ultimately affect the social standing and the quality of life of women in Iraq, and again, also in the Middle East. So with a better understanding of the history of Islam in Iraq, some of the problems potentially that Islam can bring, and how some of those problems can be solved, I hope you have a better understanding of how Islam can impact women's lives.